And now it's recording.
Okay.
And now we can say hi.
Hi. My name's John Bridges.
I'm Tara.
What are the series of questions that we're going to answer today?
Today we're going to talk about paint and paint pigments.
We sell a lot of paint.
Sell a lot of paint. One question we get a lot is why are different tubes all priced differently? What's a series of paint?
Every manufacturer has their own recipe, their own formula. They use their own ratio of pigments with binders. So acrylics use acrylic polymer with the color. Oils will use linseed oil or safflower oil, or walnut oil sometimes with the pigment. So it has to do with the scarcity of the pigment and how much they use to make a certain color.
Mm-hmm. A Series 1 is the least expensive.
Right. And those are the boring colors.
Whites and browns.
Whites, browns, blacks usually, because those are the most common pigments that they use, like dirt.
What is a pigment?
Okay, so a pigment is a dried element, perhaps, or a rock, or some kind of material that has been ground up and milled in a certain way, so it'll be easier to mix with the binder and then make the color. So they use heavy metals like cadmium, cobalt, manganese, and titanium dioxide, that sort of thing, or they'll use ground up ores.
And that's usually the more expensive stuff, the heavy metals.
Right, like cobalt, cadmium and stuff. So the prettier the color, usually, the more expensive it is.
Yeah. Here's a good question. What's the difference between student grade and artist grade?
So the student grades are meant to be less expensive for hobbyists and students to use, and there tends to be a little bit more binder in it and a little less of the true pigment, and they'll use a synthetic pigment instead. They'll substitute things. So they're not going to use the real cobalt or the real cadmium. They're going to come up with a synthetic variation to achieve near the same color. It's good paint. It's just that you have to use a lot more of it when compared to the artist's quality to achieve the same sort of effect. And it's good though for like underpainting or for large canvases, so you can lay out a field of color and then go over top of it with some nicer, prettier colors too. So that's a good cost-saving sort of thing.
What's the difference between like a pure pigment and a hue of the same?
Right, so there's like Viridian, for example, is this crazy, beautiful emerald sort of green. You can't really mix to it. It is what it is. So the real Viridian is a pretty expensive color compared to the others. It's usually a higher series number. And the hue, though, they use less of the actual Viridian pigment, and they use other synthetic colors like phthalo blue or phthalo green, that kind of thing. They come up with their own formula to match it as close as they can. And it tends to be less expensive, though.
But if you're mixing Viridian with cobalt, those are two pure pigments.
Right.
If you're mixing a hue, that might have 3 pigments in it.
Right.
So if you mix that with something else, it's going to be muddier than the two pure pigments.
That makes sense to me.
Okay, good.
Here's an actual art professor.
Celebrity guest.
Celebrity guest. Come around.
Oh, man.
Yeah. Keep your sunglasses on. She likes to be mysterious. And we were talking about student grade versus artist stuff. Let's ask an actual instructor. Do you have to use the best stuff right out of the gate?
No, but I think it's best to be aware of the differences between the two. I tend to tell students to save up their money for pigments that are brighter, and buy the professional grade, because then the actual pigment is brighter. But the earth tones are pretty cheap to mine in comparison.
Right.
So they can get the student grade.
Dirt is dirt.
tones.
Yeah.
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 Cut. What can I help you find?
That science
Oh, the
thing you were
trifold.
talking about. Yeah.
What were you gonna ask?
I was gonna mention how some tubes of paint have a toxicity warning on them, and sometimes it scares people away from getting that tube of paint.
Because we're babies.
Here's the deal. In certain states, like California, chiefly, they have different labeling laws for all sorts of things that are considered toxic.
Just don't eat
Everything's
them.
don't eat them. Everything's poisonous,
Right.
really. I mean, we're talking about cadmium, cobalt, manganese, all sorts of heavy metals. But they're also they're suspended in a liquid kind of form. They're wet. They're not like you're going to inhale them. If you don't eat it, if you don't, when you're painting and then you stop and you pick up a sandwich and take a bite of it and stuff, you may have some paint on your hands. So
Or
if
put
you
your
don't
brush in the coffee cup
Right.
instead of the water cup.
don't ingest it. And if you have any open sores or like boo-boos
Don't
or
rub it in.
whatever, don't put it in there, right? And when you're done, wash your hands with vegetable oil to scrub off that, or they have other hand cleaning
Yeah.
stuff, and then use soap and water, and you should be fine. And if you're that concerned, you can also use latex glove or nitrile or whatever kind of gloves that you want on your painting hand, or whatever. You can do all sorts of things to minimize it, but the fact remains, you're going to be using these things that have poisonous materials in
Right,
them.
yeah.
So relax and have fun and make art.
Is there anything else?
That's it.
Okay.
So that is all.
Bye.